It is the News Blitz with Randy Wang on Talk Radio 790 KABC. We're here every single day from 5 to 6 talking about the local issues that matter to you most and taking your phone calls at 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. You can email me as well at randykabc@gmail.com. That's randykabc@gmail.com. Well, if you've been listening to me for a while, listening to this show, you are aware that I am a pet lover. I am the happy pet parent of 3 animals. We've got 2 dogs and a cat. I love my Cavi Lucy. I adore my little Chihuahua mix Rita, and I tolerate my cat Jamie. They are a big part of my life, and I am always looking to shine a light on anybody that wants to help out the animals in the state of California. Because right now, there's a little bit of a crisis going on at shelters throughout the state of California. That actually inspired on Saturday, it was California Adopt a Pet Day, where every shelter in the state was offering adoptions for free, waiving the fees. I'd love to see more events like that. Well, there is one member of the California State Senate who has just gotten 2 bills passed through the state Senate on their way to the Assembly and hopefully signed into law that will definitely help the situation going on in the shelters and help out with the animal welfare that is so desperately needed in this state. She joins us right now. It's a pleasure to welcome State Senator Janet Nguyen to the News Blitz. State Senator, hello.
Hi, Randy. Thank you for having me, and thank you for letting me talk about my 2 animal shelter bills that will improve the lives of our 4-legged friends. And just so you know, we have a German Shepherd, and we also have a gecko. Those are our 2 pets at our house.
Oh, wow. That's quite a combination there. Now, Senator Nguyen, tell us exactly what inspired you to write SB 1459.
So with both of the bills, before creating the bills, the most I've done was just visit animal shelters, especially when I was in high school and junior high, just visiting as a young girl, playing with the dogs there and just hoping to be able to help them. But my experience, in this whole process has really opened my eyes. I learned so much about the the county shelters, and I learned so much what they don't do and how we need to help our 4-legged friends, because at the end of the day, they don't have a voice. We are their voice. And hearing dozens and dozens of volunteers and rescue groups who've told my staff horror stories of what really goes on in the shelter, it's one of those where you just like, you grinch. You're like, oh, I didn't hear that, And so, I'll give you an example. So one story was there was a young husky that was hit by a car and landed in the shelter. He was not diagnosed, but rather left to just bleed to death for 3 days in his cage. His medical record was almost completely blank and had no entry for any treatment or pain meds. So that's one.
That's unbelievable. That's unacceptable.
Yep. Second one, I saw a photo of as a little kid missing half her front leg, sitting for a photo with a look of pain. You can see the pain in that photo. And, she was left there without medical treatment and didn't even get even a bandage. So, thankfully, a group of rescue group volunteers paid for her medical bills, and she wasn't euthanized. That's the thing that we don't know is, why can't we get the euthanization rates for some of these shelters? And you kind of wonder why, because they should have those numbers, right? And so, the 2 bills that I'm working on would do the following. One, it gives guidelines to veterinarians for medical notation on charts, such as timeliness of treatment, pain control, and treatment of the injuries. It will also take care of situations like we had with the husky, who lack a medical record. 2 is it will require government shelters in large counties to report data on their websites monthly, not annually, not quarterly, because it's all over the place in California. We want to know the number of intake and outtakes, euthanization, and natural deaths. This is done in other states and large cities across the nation, but not in California. Like I said, some places have them monthly, and actually, quarterly. Some have them annually. Some don't even have them at all. So we just want to know across the state, if you're in, Los Angeles County, you want to know how many dogs or cats or, rabbits, whatever it is, the intakes and outtakes of these animals, and whether they were euthanized, whether they were natural deaths. That's what we want. So by posting all these data, we're going to hold the shelters accountable. And we get to compare between various counties. Like, for example, how come one county is doing better at adoption than the other? Or why does one have such high intake or euthanization rates? That way we can learn from each other and do better, because ultimately, you and I, animal lovers, we just want to make sure that these animals, if they are able to be adoptable, we should get them to be adopted. They are our family. They're part of family. They're not just a pet. They're family.
I think what you're doing is so important, especially, we broadcast to all of Southern California, but I'm here in LA County, and the shelters that are run by the city of Los Angeles, there is something going on where they are not being transparent at all about the overcrowding situation, about euthanasia, where most people who don't know too much about the system assume, because they were told, that LA is a no-kill shelter system, and that's just absolutely not true. And there is no data to be transparent about what they're doing. There have been allegations from different rescue groups that they are saying that dogs are sick when they're not, or they're violent when they're not, just so they can get them on a list where they can get euthanized, because there's no space. And that is completely unacceptable, in my opinion.
And I agree with you, because the data is there. If they don't have anything to hide, then just put it up. It's not a big deal. And we're hearing that as well. There's been animals because I represent 3 cities in Los Angeles County, and I represent about majority of Orange County cities. And we hear from both sides, from the volunteers group, the rescue groups, that there's animals that are being put up on the euthanization list that are adoptable. There was actually one that we worked on from my office to help the dog get adopted, and he was adopted before the days that he had to be euthanized, and so he's adoptable. These animals are adoptable. It's just a matter of getting the word out there. And what is it? Is it the cost? I mean, we don't know, and that's the problem. Is we don't know what the shelters need from us. And we've got great shelters in Orange County. We've got one in Dana Point, Newport Beach. They're great. They're no kill rate, and their adoption rate is 100%, and their return rate is like basically very minimum, or if none. They not only allow the family to pick the dogs, but they also go through and tell the family what type of dog. And if you have an apartment, do you want a German Shepherd, or if you're not a runner, you might not want a German Shepherd. You might want a smaller dog. I mean, they help the family find the right fit, and so that's why the rate of return is also very low. I was able to visit these shelters, and it's amazing how happy these animals are in some of these shelters. And then you've got the bigger shelters where it's like they're euthanizing these animals, and we don't even know where they go. I mean, even in Orange County, there were rabbits that were sent out of state, and no one knows what happened to it. And the location they were sent to was a reptile facility. And there's no record of what happened to those rabbits.
That is wild. We are talking to California State Senator, represents most of Orange County and parts of LA County, Janet Nguyen. She has authored SB 1459 and SB 1478 to help improve the conditions and improve transparency when it comes to the shelter systems in the state of California. Now, Senator, before the show, I watched some of the Senate floor when you were getting this passed just a few weeks ago, and you brought up something that I've been hearing about a lot lately, and it has to do to, with these trap and release programs, something that was halted here in Los Angeles because of COVID. And from what we've heard, it never came back. And part of the reason that we're seeing so many more intakes than we ever have before, at least in the city of Los Angeles, because it's no longer policy that if you pick up a stray to spay it before you put it out there. And so they're putting out unspayed cats, unneutered cats and dogs to be out there to overpopulate.
Yeah, unfortunately, that part of my bill got removed by the committee, and so without our knowledge, we just accept it. That's what happens in the Senate. The trap neuter release program is actually really important, and we were trying to fix that problem because, as you mentioned, Randy, is that right now, like Orange County, you cannot bring in a stray cat from outside. Most of them will not accept any more cats from outside because they don't want the responsibility of it, and they cannot neuter it and release it. The concern is that cats are so overpopulated out there. The best we should do is if you're going to bring it in, let us neuter the cat and then release it in its own community where it came from. But unfortunately, there were a lot of there was some concern, not a lot, just a few groups that were concerned with whether they're community cats or not, and what's the definition of community cats. Right now, shelters across the state don't want to do the trap, neuter, and release because it could be a misdemeanor if they did so. It's considered abandonment of an animal, and that's illegal under the law. And so we were trying to fix that. We're hoping maybe next time we'll try it again. But right now, our bills is holding them accountable by either with the medical for veterinarians, guidelines for veterinarians, and also the reporting on the website. And Randy, if I can ask, I know that you have a lot of listeners who are animal lovers. If they can call and help me, call their assembly members and ask them to vote to pass SB 1459 and SB 1478 so that we can move these bills and so they can head to the governor's desk for his consideration, and hopefully he would sign it into law and we could go effectively. And look, yeah. I know – I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you did get, bipartisan, unanimous support in the state Senate, so I hope this is a smooth ride to the governor's desk.
We hope so, but you never know. I've been up here for 8 years, and, things happen, and that's where is, getting your listener to call in just to make sure. I don't take anything for granted, and so having them call in and making sure that their assembly member hears about it and their concerns, it would help us tremendously. And look, I know shelters have a tough job, and I realize that. But I also believe there need to be best practices, and we need to be accessible and open to the public. That's all I'm asking for. And so that we can all have an opportunity to adopt the animal that we want to be our family.
Well, and I think transparency is so important for everybody, because if a shelter truly is in crisis, like we all know that, the city of Los Angeles is and a lot of other big cities, then it needs to be out there in front of the public to see. That might motivate extra people if they do have room in their home, if they do have room in their family, to help out and take some of these animals out of the shelter system. But just saying everything's okay, we just have some budget issues is not the way that, we want to be running these things. If there's a problem, the first step is identifying what the problem is.
Yes, and that's through the data. That would be helpful.
Exactly. Now, like she said, State Senator Janet Nguyen, if you want to see these two bills passed, SB 1459, which helps add transparency to the animal shelter system, and SB 1478, which would add some notations to help make sure veterinarians' notations are uniform across the board. You can call your local assemblyman. You can make sure this gets passed, this gets signed to the governor's desk, and we'll keep moving forward. And I would implore you, if you're listening as well, if you wish that the part that was going to be in the law that would regulate the trap and release program, you want that to get a second look at, call your local assemblymen, your state senators. Let's get more people paying attention to that. I'm so glad that you're onto this and you know what's going on there, because from everything I've heard from the advocates, that's one of the hugest problems that we're facing right now is even though we know we have a huge population that needs to be spayed and neutered, we're refusing to do it.
Yep. Yeah, and if we can hear more voices, maybe the assembly would be willing to put it back into the bill. It's up to them. And so right now, as it's moving forward, it does not have the trap, neuter, and release program. And as we've all seen, there's thousands and tens of thousands of cats roaming around in our neighborhoods. And so all I'm doing is I wanted to help with that population out in the community.
I think you're doing a great work here. I hope to see this thing get across the finish line. State Senator Janet Nguyen, you can follow her on Twitter at Janet Nguyen CA, and she also has a State Senate one, which is Sen Janet Nguyen. Janet Nguyen, thank you so much for spending some time with us, and say hi to the German Shepherd and the gecko for us.
I will. Thank you so much, Randy. Take care. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for coming on. Absolutely. There is State Senator Janet Nguyen, and she is trying to make the shelter system at least a little more transparent. Before we go to break here, let's go to Laura in Agora. Laura, hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
I can.
Hello? Oh, good.
Hi.
Okay. Hi. I wanted to mention something about Senator Nguyen's bill. I realize she has great intentions in doing it, but here's the problem. Shelters lately are taking cats that people bring in, non-feral, adoptable cats, and they are simply turning them out back to the streets without food, water, or care. They just put them back outside. Some of them they spay neuter first. Some shelters, other shelters, like you noted about Los Angeles shelters, they don't even spay or neuter them first. So that just makes the problem worse. And the problem with her bill is that when shelters just turn the cats outside and don't impound them, don't give them a chance to even be rescued or adopted, the shelters then can keep all those cats, and it does amount to thousands of cats, out of their statistics. And by keeping those cats out of their statistics, they can easily claim that they're being no-kill. You can't kill a cat, you don't impound. But you also can't help them by giving them a chance to be adopted or rescued. And so the problem with her bill is that it requires limited data to be reported, but it does not require the shelters to disclose how many cats they are simply abandoning back outside and how many cats they are refusing to impound. So that's problem number one with the bill as it's written. And I also want to mention, since Senator Nguyen mentioned the community cat part of it, that the problem with it, and yes, there was a lot of opposition, the problem with it is that by allowing cats to be simply turned outside the way it did, it included these non-feral adoptable cats who don't have the survival skills of a feral cat, who go out and they suffer from starvation, dehydration, predation. They get eaten by coyotes and so on. And it's a terrible way to live, and it's a terrible way for them to die because they don't have the skills of a feral cat. And so, if that part of the bill would have been amended to include only feral cats, then she would have had complete support for it. But since it also included cats who are adoptable and non-feral, who would suffer outside, then that's why she had opposition. And I think that might be why it got removed from her legislation.
Well, here's what I would advise, because I think you know more about this than probably most people out there, is this thing, can still be amended as it's going back and forth between the Assembly and the State Senate. Reach out to your local member of the Assembly, because this is going before them yet. Make your case as clear as you made it to me, and maybe we can get those amendments in there to make this an even better bill. Laura, thank you so much for your call. I appreciate it. Let's go to Sharon in Fountain Valley. Sharon, hello.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for having me on. So my name is Sharon Logan, and I am a constituent in Janet Nguyen's district. And I actually successfully sued the Orange County Animal Shelter back in 2014 over their high euthanasia rates. And as part of the lawsuit for the for the next 2 years, the shelter actually had to provide my rescue and my attorneys with the monthly euthanasia rates that was going on at Orange County Animal Care. So back in 2016, when we got the first report, OC Animal Care was killing a third of their animals that came into the shelter, okay, like a third. So what I also want to mention is I was at the state capitol a month ago, and a bunch of rescues, okay, and there was a bunch of us that, once again, we do believe in true TR, right? Trap, neuter, release. But like Los Angeles City, Long Beach, San Diego, and Orange County Animal Care was implementing this, how do I say it, bastardized version of TNR called RTF, Return to Field. So what they were doing is they were taking healthy, adoptable, friendly, non-feral cats, and if those cats weren't getting adopted within 1 to 3 days, they were throwing them back out onto the streets and calling them community cats, right? So that's cruel and inhumane, and San Diego Humane Society is currently being sued for that practice. So I just want to say there's a difference, right? We believe in true TNR. We do not believe in RTF of healthy, adoptable, feral, friendly cats. They should have a chance to be adopted in a shelter. They should have a chance to go into a home. You know, we are amenable, like, let's say they've been in the shelter for 30 days and then they were facing euthanasia. Okay, we are amenable to putting them back into the streets as long as they have a caregiver. They have to have a caregiver. Orange County was putting these friendly, healthy, adoptable, non-feral cats back into the streets without a caregiver so they could bolster their live release rates and claim no kill. That's what was happening.
It seems like there is so much manipulation of the data out there. And what we need is a lot more transparency. Sure. Thank you so much for what your organization did in trying to get some of that transparency in Orange County. And thanks for educating the audience. Sharon, thank you so much for the call. I appreciate it. 800-222-KABC is the number. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. We just spoke with California State Senator Janet Nguyen, who has authored a couple of bills to increase the transparency in our shelter systems in the state of California. We might do a whole hour on this, we might not, but there's a lot of people listening that know a lot about this, who happen to work at rescue or volunteer organizations. How would you solve the shelter crisis that we're seeing in LA and the state of California? I mean, the shelters were so overcrowded. On Saturday, we had to waive all the fees just to get some of these pets out of the shelters. How do you think we solve the shelter crisis in California? 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. We'll take some of your calls next on the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. It is the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. We're here every single day from 5 to 6 talking about the local issues that matter to you most and taking your phone calls at 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. You can email me as well, randykabc@gmail.com. That's randykabc@gmail.com. We just talked to State Senator Janet Nguyen about her bills, SB 1459 and 1478, to at least improve the transparency in our animal shelter systems in the state of California. There's a lot of people that are very engaged on this topic, and we're here to take your calls and your reaction. Let's go to Joanne in LA. Joanne, hello.
Hi, Randy. Thank you for the work you do. Okay,
thank you.
I just want to say that I have worked with these groups for years. My friend and I, we cleaned up all of Glendale and half of LA like 10 years ago. We got everybody spayed and neutered and fed. People do not just say, hey, I'm going to let this cat starve, but I just think I'll take him in and get him fixed. Nobody does that. Anybody who brings a street cat in to be fixed is feeding it, is taking care of it. Nobody just ups and takes a strange cat to get fixed and that's all. Nobody does that.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like something a regular person would do.
The people who, first of all, there's hardly ever even a really feral cat on the street. They're kitties that have been dumped or got lost. They're almost all of them are tame. They're just homeless cats. And it's true that if you take them into the shelter, some of them they might find homes, but we have a very high kill rate. Why do that if they have someone who takes care of them every day, feeds them every day, and gets them fixed every day? Why just turn them out to the street to reproduce? I mean, that's only going to put more cats out on the street. And when there's too many cats on the street, evil people start doing things like poisoning them. And it draws coyotes into the city who eat the cats. So all they need is to make it mandatory when someone brings in a street cat to get fixed, that they sign a paper that says they're going to take care of that cat.
I mean, yeah, that could be one way to fix it. There might be some people who they don't want that cat's responsibility tied to them, but hey, you seem to know exactly what you're talking about here. Joanne, thank you so much for the call. Appreciate it. Hey, I don't know what the solution is to the crisis that's going on here, but every time you see those videos in the local news about how overcrowded the shelters are, it breaks your heart. Let's go to Gail in Valley Village. Gail, hello.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. I am a trapper in North Hollywood that's been doing it over 10 years, plus a feeder. And I have to tell you, also fighting against Los Angeles, because what they are doing and what they are killing is not to be believed. As far as transparency, they have no transparency. But anyway, let's get back to the TNR, because they're not accepting cats, period. If you find a cat, they're telling you, please return it where they found it unfixed. Seriously? They're creating the overpopulation. There is no cat policy. Our new general manager has been at the job almost a year, and there's still no cat policy. I've been phoning in the commission meetings asking for the policy. There is no cat policy. Return to field, which every speaker spoke against, is wrong, completely wrong. I did not want her bill to pass because return to release is too broad. It just allows anybody to bring a cat into the shelter days later, if it doesn't get adopted, to supposedly return it to where someone says an address is. And we all know people who bring animals to the shelter, they either lie about them being theirs or strays. They're never telling the truth. As far as LA Animal Services, there needs to be a massive investigation on where the money goes. It's not going to the dogs. They are killing for space, and they need to come out and tell the truth. If they tell the truth that they're killing for space, people will know. There's never been anything called No Kill LA. You tell somebody enough, and they're going to believe No Kill LA. And people do believe that, and that Los Angeles is no kill. The sad thing about Los Angeles, for being a progressive city, it's one of the worst cities to own an animal. There is no veterinarian care. There is no support for people who feed colonies on the street, who truly, truly have the best interest in mind. Rescue has turned into a business, and unfortunately, some of the rescues who are just helping and saving the animals from the shelters, they're going broke because they have to pay for all the medical. LA Animal Services, it does not spend their money wisely or smartly, and it's definitely not for the animals. It's more for the employees. And
I think we have complete evidence about what you're saying. You are so right about the mismanagement that's going on over there, and the inability for the vast majority of the LA City Council or Karen Bass to even address that there is a crisis going on right now.
I've called into the council meetings many times and told them that a mass investigation, we were supposed to have a major audit. We're still waiting for that, but there are ways to help curb, and one of those is get the dogs and cats off of Skid Row. Okay, there's a difference between homeless people owning animals, living in their cars, and the bums and the people who live on Skid Row where they're breeding the animals for money and using them to support their habits. They don't want to go in houses, and those dogs and cats are just being used to make profits on their own, and that's the sad thing. And there's no enforcement. No enforcement.
You're right about that. Gosh, I wish you were the one in charge, Gail. You know exactly what you're talking about. Thank you so much for the call and everything you do. We get some real saints out there in the audience. Let's go to Whitney in L.A. Whitney, hello.
Hey, hi. Thanks for taking my call. So I'm looking at possible solutions, and just recently our general manager, Danes, brought a longtime employee named Don Paul, who's worked at South LA Shelter for over 20 years. And she said, what's one suggestion? And he said, more mobiles. And mobile adoptions is how you get animals in front of the public. I'm a rescuer of 20 years. I do also TNR like Gail does. But if you walk by a dog or a cat and you're out and about, that's when you're going to see them and make a connection. Even with social media and pictures and videos, it still doesn't get bodies into the shelter. For whatever reason, this shelter management is just tone deaf and will not focus on mobiles and really aggressive mobiles, like at the Grove, like high profile events. This is how they get adopted. And that will at least help get some animals homes and reduce the population. The bigger macro picture is enforcing spay and neuter laws and really cracking down and not making it a paper tiger that it's been for so long. I also live in downtown LA, right, Skid Row adjacent. I do a lot of interfacing down there, and I've been involved in way too many stories that you would not want to hear about how animals' lives are so cheap down there, the breeding, the trading for drugs. They get abandoned when somebody goes on a bender and they get tied up. And, you know, there are a few people that can be responsible for their pets, but nobody has the money for emergency care or the proper medical care. Even middle-class people in LA are struggling to do that. So, you know, but LA Animal Services also does need a thorough audit. You may be surprised that there's $40,000, $50,000, $100,000 that comes into the department, and you will never see it in the animal's cage. You will never see it in advertising. You will never see it on bus wraps. You will never see it on billboards, and you will never see it promoting the animals. And that's the big sin, is that there's $6 million in the Animal Welfare Trust Fund, and they won't even spend it to send a dog out to get an orthopedic surgery. They'll let the dog sit and wait for a rescue to step up while the dog sits there with a broken leg. I've had a broken leg. It's very painful. So there's a lot of overhaul, but basically it's a toxic department and it needs to be cleaned out, basically.
It really does. But at the very least, the first thing that you talked about, having activation events, having mobile adoptions, getting the animals in people's faces, that's a brilliant, simple idea that doesn't even take that much time or energy to do. But with current management, they don't.
Yeah.
Exactly. And there's plenty of so many kind-hearted, good souls out there that want nothing more to do than to create a better environment for these animals. And it seems like those are the voices that are being ignored right now by current management, Stacey Danes, and through that Karen Bass.
It seems to be there. For whatever reason, the people that are the most experienced and are desperate to help are totally ignored. It's just the way government works. I don't know. Just a thing.
There's got to be a better way. Seems like your cat is hungry, so I'm going to let you go. Whitney, thank you so much for the call. Appreciate it. 800-222-KABC is the phone number. You know, I had to change my cat's feeding time to do this show because I do it in my house, in my gym room, which is half gym room, half studio, half cat's room, because her food is here, her box is here, and I used to feed her at 5:30. And when I started doing this show, I was like, you know what? She's going to whine the entire time. So I feed her specifically at 4:45 so you don't hear her. And even sometimes that doesn't work because sometimes you do hear Cat Jamie. Yeah, I'm talking to you. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang. More of your calls in minutes on Talk Radio 790 KABC. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. Hey, have you gotten to the podcast of this show yet? Go to KABC.com, click on podcasts, go to the Apple Podcasts app, iHeart, Spotify, search for the News Blitz, search for Randy Wang, you'll find it. And this is the coolest thing. You hit subscribe, and at least on Apple Podcasts, which you should definitely check out Friday's show, The Best Tacos in Southern California, it automatically creates an entire transcript. So you can read the whole show, which if you're trying to just go through and look for some of the taco recommendations makes it even easier to do. Check out the News Blitz podcast. More of your calls in minutes on Talk Radio 790 KEBC. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang. We're running out of time, so if I go to you, we've only got about 30 seconds for each call. Kathy in LA. Kathy, hello.
Hi, Randy. I want to thank you for talking about this today. So I run a rescue group in Los Angeles. So the thing that people don't want to admit is we can't adopt our way out of this mess unless the city's going to get serious about spay and neuter enforcement. And they have to stop issuing breeding license, and they need to crack down on the Craigslist backyard breeders. Today alone, I got 3 emails from 3 different shelters with French bulldogs that had neurological issues. I'm like, it's insane. So it really has to start with enforcing spay neuter and having a whole program for it. My idea is similar to like a parking meter employee program. You would have a whole department to hire people to go zip code by zip code, door to door, and enforce spay neuter and offer free spay neuter for people who can't afford it.
I think that is one of the simplest steps that we've got to take. Make that an option for everybody. Make it free because it saves us money in the long run. Kathy, thanks for the call. Joe, you got 30 seconds. Joe, hello.
Hey, 30 seconds. Thank you, Randy. I listening to everybody calling in, and I just wanted to, can I give a shout out to an adoption?
Of course you can, if you can do it in 30 seconds.
Yeah. It's called the Permaid Cafe in Camarillo. Robin and Jeff Kent, they were wonderful. They have a storefront, and they saved us. My sister passed away. She had 4 cats. We didn't know what to do. We had a whole house we had to clean out, and they saved us. They got 2 cats went to one home, and the other 2 went to another home, and I've seen the pictures of them, and they're happy. And I just felt like I should give a shout out to them. I hope their phone doesn't light up from this and they go crazy. But they're wonderful.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for that shout out. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC.